ready, Kelly? All right, we're going to start with introductions. I'm Holly Bitcon, Resource Specialist.
I'm Amelia Mokashi, Amelia's mother.
Dwight Pratt, Principal.
Aura Hassan, Program Supervisor.
Sean Dean, Speech Language Pathologist.
Taylor Gregory, 5th grade teacher.
And on the Zoom call, we have Jara Manchego, Timmy Hong.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you tell her position for my mom's
Yes,
benefit?
Jara Manchego is our DHH specialist, deaf and hard of hearing. Timmy Hong is our district school psychologist. And then we have Dr. Holly in our meeting, which is Ms. Mokashi's educational advocate. So this is a part two.
Just to introduce my mother, Peg Bear. I don't know if you're able to say hello, Mom, but you can introduce yourself.
I can see you and hear you, but I'm invisible.
Well, she's not invisible.
And Kelly, you got a haircut. I like it.
Oh, she saw too.
I told you she hadn't seen it. So first and foremost, Peg is Amelia's grandmother. She's also a retired audiologist and pathologist as well.
I did give you the procedural safeguards in our last meeting, and you have it via email as well. Purpose of today's meeting is our part two, continuing the conversation from part one. And Mr. Pratt, can you review our meeting norms, please?
Absolutely. For those in Zoom land, meeting norms are we always want to assume positive intent, keep it student-centered, so keep it focused on Amelia. That's why we're here, to give her the best environment possible. And then to find solutions. That's a new one for the Walnut Grove crew this year. But we want to find solutions. We are on a definite time crunch today. There's a lot to go over, so let's just get through it as efficiently as possible and put our best foot forward.
Okay, and I know that Kelly, you wanted to start us off. In an email, you asked that you be the first on the agenda to review your key points and concerns.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight, I do appreciate our time to meet together today, and that we did not have an opportunity to get through everything on the agenda the other week, so I greatly appreciate that. The biggest ask is that we focus on the CAPD findings and the report from Dr. Beer. Dr. Beer is not able to attend today, but she said if we needed to have a follow-up, we could coordinate that. I want to include on today's agenda to talk about the OHI eligibility for CAPD, which is a most important priority for me, just because once we get that good to go, then we can move forward for services, as well as I know there's an ask for additional testing, and definitely open to that, but I want to make sure we identify that if possible. I know we couldn't make that official decision in the last meeting because we didn't have all required attendees, so I appreciate the psychologists jumping in. I hope you've had a time to read the report from Dr. Beer, and just to reiterate that for CAPD eligibility, it is required by the licensed audiologist by ASHA, and that according to the criteria and according to Dr. Beer's recommendation, she did verbalize it in the last meeting, but I wanted to reiterate that Amelia does qualify. And so that is, once again, my most important ask, that we come to a team decision around that, and then we can discuss, obviously additional ways that we can support her. But based upon also in the report, there are very specific items that Dr. Beer recommends for Amelia if we do make that conclusion for the CAPD identification, and specific getting clarification if we have the right person in the district to help with some of the recommendations that Dr. Beer suggests, specifically, for example, the bottom-up direct intervention, auditory training, and the other one that she identified is the discrimination, auditory discrimination skills. So those are the two just examples of what she identified specific for CAPD. I know there's other accommodations.
Kelly, could I jump in for just a second?
Sure.
And to say 2 cents worth? Is
Yes.
that all right?
Sure.
Or would you rather wait?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you for letting me join up today. Of course, I have high interest in this because Amelia is my granddaughter. I also professionally have a high interest in this. I have spent 40 plus years as both a clinical audiologist and an educational audiologist, as well as an SLP. I worked at the San Francisco Hearing and Speech Center for years, transferred to Children's Hospital of the East Bay, as it was called back then, where I was on the child development team. Then we moved to Iowa, and I have worked since then in Iowa for an educational agency. Iowa is divided into 9 agencies to provide the special ed services so that they're equal throughout the state. So a small town will get the same services as a larger city. There I was supervisor of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program, supervisor of the Parent Ed Connection program, and I believe California has a similar one, and supervisor of assistive technology. So strong interest in what's going on, and I have to say, I thought Dr. Beer's report was excellent. So that's my plug.
Okay, thank you. And just to piggyback on that, Kelly, I don't know if you mentioned it, but post the first IEP meeting, when we ran out of time to discuss specifically the report we're here to discuss today of Dr. Beer, Dr. Davis, Dr. Beer, myself, and Mom gathered again via email to discuss the last meeting, discuss findings, and all were in agreement that this qualification really should be looked at in terms of Dr. Beer's report and how that translate to a school setting. So I really, again, want to mirror Kelly here, keeping the focus on that today.
Definitely, and I just want to note for the record, we all agree that to the criteria and the diagnosis of CAPD. We're not contesting that. Today's meeting, you can see in the agenda, there's 2 pages, and we're going to go through every single recommendation and talk about each thing, and then we're going to talk about the OHI eligibility. So
Can we move that to the top of the agenda though, to get that done first? Because the audiologist is the one that has the qualifications to give the recommendation for the eligibility. So I would prefer we just make that decision, and then we can talk about the services. And then the other requests for additional testing, which I know you would like to do as well, for Amelia, in addition to with the signed consent that I need to give for the hearing as well. So I would prefer we just make that agreement. If we
can, so in the school setting for IEP purposes, the eligibility categories are interpreted by the school psychologist. So that's why we brought in Ms. Hong. And Ms. Hong, would you like to speak to the request? Because you were a part of the initial conversation that we had with Dr. Davis, and there was a discussion then as to SLD or OHI.
Right, but Amelia's case has changed since then. So
Right,
things
so-
are very, very different than a year ago.
Right. So Ms.
So-
Hong?
Yeah, sure, no, we can do that. So, I mean, generally speaking, with OHI, we don't need a medical disability, right, diagnosis or anything like that. I've qualified to determine kids eligible under that category without like an official diagnosis of ADHD or whatnot. And I do recognize that the CAPD does fall under a medical disability. I'm not negating that at all. However, like with a lot of other categories, the categories of eligibility, we do need to conduct a comprehensive evaluation to determine that you can't be attacked on, eligibility in the discussion in light of a new diagnosis that comes up. I've been in this situation where, kids in an IEP and a diagnosis arises And we consider that, we consider the accommodations, which is something I think we've been talking about. I was in a part of the last meeting, but definitely it sounds like we're moving in the right direction in terms of, providing accommodations. I know FM system is definitely one to accommodate for the hearing loss that I'm learning about too. So I think I don't understand why there's an urgency for us to capture that diagnosis at this point.
Because just to clarify, the authorization as a team, we agreed to go out and have an audiologist test Amelia for COPD. These are the findings from Dr. Beer, who is the one who is authorized to identify this. So I don't understand the issue
I think there
to.
must be, I need to clarify.
It says evidence introduced in court established COPD requires a diagnosis by an audiologist, and noted that while a teacher, parent, or an IEP team may identify symptoms or behaviors that are indicative of the medical condition, a licensed audiologist must conduct the examination. That's why we agreed to do the test, and these are her findings. So
Right,
I don't
and
understand.
we're not disagreeing with the CAPD.
Right, but so then why can't we?
We're saying the OHI component is not something Dr. Beer has sole authority to say she's eligible
What's the
for.
problem including it? Why is there resistance? If we're going to have an open conversation and come to solutions, then I need to know what the issue is.
Well, part of it too is like Ms. Holmes said, we would need to reassess.
Reassess what? Because
She wasn't eligible last time, and we can't.
We're talking a year ago, and so we can't
Right.
go on old data. We have new data as of today.
We have some new data.
Right,
We would
so-
need to include more new data. We don't have a new psychologist report. We don't have a new ed specialist report. And two parts of any special ed eligibility category is those two prongs. And that's the part that we don't have. We have information now from Dr. Beer, and we have information that these things are things that could help her. The part that we don't have is the question of whether she now meets OHI eligibility based on this new information. That's what we don't have.
Excuse me, could I ask what is OHI?
OHI is other health impairment. It includes a variety of different ailments, and it has two parts to it. It has the academic impact, and then it also has the more not necessarily you need a medical diagnosis, but there's ed code criteria that are specific for that part. And so what I was saying is we're not discrediting Dr. Beer's findings at all. We're questioning whether we have enough information to reconsider the other health impairment eligibility category through an IEP. Because we need a school psychologist and we need an ed specialist to weigh in on that component
We're all
of it.
here. We're all
They would have-
here.
they would have to
So
do
I
this,
don't
you know.
understand.
We'd have to reassess.
So
Reassess.
I want to chime in here. I understand the legalities of needing to now qualify under a different category. The district has to, by law, do their own assessment with district staff members, taking into account outside specialists. They cannot qualify a child simply with an outside neuropsych or any diagnostic material. They have to do their own assessment. One thing I want to know is also just really looking at time of the essence, resources, putting the student through testing again, going back to the initial testing that the school did. She could have really gone both ways if we go back to the initial school testing and Dr. Davis's input. It's clear there's two things happening here that really can't be separated. There's the specific learning differences, and there's OHI, also indicative of signs of ADHD, not classified, but signs of, that again, we still can't completely tease out having this new diagnosis. If we had gone back to the original school assessment that the psychologist did, I'm pretty sure it probably could have gone either other way.
We did discuss that. We actually discussed that, and we tossed it around. And
We did.
and I was strongly encouraged to say, oh, do SLD. You don't need to do OHI.
Yeah.
So I do recall that
It
conversation.
seems like, yeah, so it seems like having read all the emails, all the reports, speaking to Dr. Davis, that there was that offer of potentially classifying it under OHI with enough evidence from the first assessment. I'm thinking of this from both a practical and a child development perspective. Will now be taking a kid out of school for even more hours, missing school, who desperately needs the time, and spending school money and resources with another assessment. If we have data that we could review in collaboration with Dr. Peters' report, I would strongly recommend that. I think we're all talking the same language, but we might not be connecting the dots.
Yeah.
And how do we streamline this with what we know, what we have, going back to the initial assessment where she qualified to have an IEP in the first place? I would highly think would be a wonderful use of all of our time.
Yeah, and I would agree with that path if we didn't have the bilateral hearing loss variable in that, because we only get 2 categories to capture on an IEP, and I don't know at this moment what's primary and what's secondary. So that part concerns me if we're using, and it seems like the hearing loss occurred fairly recently, and it was after these assessments. So I think that the variable, what's changed in this is that bilateral hearing loss component. And that's why I would be hesitant to use that data from a year ago, because there's been a new development with this bilateral hearing loss.
Right, and we haven't done the school assessment yet by the deaf and hard of hearing specialist. So
Right.
Yeah. So my recommendation would be you can still amend the IEP now. We can have primary SLD, secondary OHI. As you go through that assessment and we're gaining more information about Amelia, that can be amended if we find, oh, wait, these new findings around the bilateral hearing loss are really significant. We need to reevaluate these 2 categories, amend it and change the classification. That's doable. Yes, we still don't have a piece, but it can be yes and but in the now. What we do know in the now.
Ms. Hong?
Yeah, I think it's premature for us to really consider that at this point. I at least, would like to entertain the idea of completing those 2, the speech and the DHH evaluation, before we consider that at this point in time. But typically, when we add a new category, that entails a comprehensive evaluation. And I understand, yes, to put Amelia through a lot of testing, a lot of time at the end of the school year. She's a 5th grader. She's going to have a lot of fun activities at the end. I actually want to avoid that route. And that would mean that I feel like keeping SLD as it is, and then reviewing that at, I believe, May, before the school year ends, when we finish the evaluation, to revisit that, possibly if we can do the assessment over the summer, so that, there's more time for us to look at that as well. But I do feel like we need to still tease out what is the primary, eligibility criteria, because like Mr. Sean said, we can only capture 2 at this point. And just to add on, because of a medical diagnosis that she had is really not the best practice. I'm not comfortable with the idea of tagging on, because just like, we have students with medical diagnosis, they don't necessarily require, specialized academic instruction to address that. And so we are at this point, I'm uncertain, so I'm not comfortable at all moving forward.
But also with auditory processing hearing disorder, it's not just a medical diagnosis, and if you speak with any learning disability specialist, specifically with dyslexia, they go hand in hand. So we're really, again, getting back to the same thing.
And that, I may be able to capture auditory processing under SLD as well, which is something that we didn't capture definitely on the testing that we did on the TAPS. She was all within average range.
We want to pause because Mom needed to step out, so I don't want her to miss any of the conversation.
Totally understood.
Yeah.
Totally understood. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, no, it's so hard with these, there I am. It's so hard with these hybrid meetings.
I know.
So
I just came from a mediation in person, and I like it so much more.
I know. I do appreciate the flexibility though, because I feel like, people can join from different areas, so that part's nice. Sorry, we paused the conversation.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
So again, I think what, to speak to the psychologist's point that central auditory processing disorder can be captured under SLD, absolutely. The main thing at this point is really then making sure the IEP, the accommodations and the support services are capturing that now, because we know there's a need now, as we're waiting for the hearing assessment to tease out what is primary, what is secondary. But we know there's a need. No matter what you want to umbrella it under, OHI, or bump up the services under SLD, there's a need.
Yeah, agreed.
So just so I can make sure, everyone spoke really, really fast, trying to process it. So are we all in agreement that the CAPD identification, and we're just trying to figure out if we're going to, the consideration for SLD versus OHI? Is that what I'm understanding?
So it sounds like we're not in consensus. So Ms. Hong is not comfortable adding on OHI at this time,
Right.
or capturing it under SLD, under auditory processing, without further assessment.
Okay, so this is what I don't understand. So the CAPD identification is required by an audiologist, correct?
Yes.
So that's why we did the testing. So
Yeah.
I want to ask if we can agree to identify CAPD for my daughter, but then this idea of tagging it to SLD versus OHI is still open.
Right. Nobody's disagreeing with
Right,
the
so
diagnosis.
right,
It's just the eligibility category isn't, we're not able to consider it without further assessment.
Okay, so this is what I don't agree with, because CAPD has to be identified by an audiologist. I hear the issue about SLD versus OHI. I totally get that, and I totally agree. But if by law they're saying that the audiologist, and why we agreed to go get her tested for CAPD, I don't understand why that should not be acknowledged and identified. The SLD versus OHI, we can flush out later, because we know we can only do 2. And I hear loud and clear we need to get her tested for hard of hearing to see if she qualifies or not. I think we all can agree on that.
Yeah.
My ask is, why can't we agree to identify, to say, yes, she has central auditory processing disorder? We should be able to agree to that, because the audiologist is the one that has to identify it. That's why we agreed on the testing.
We are agreeing on that,
Well,
but it's
that's
not
not
a
what
category on the IEP.
It's not carry on its own, it's not a distinct.
Yeah, it's not a separate category. If it was simple enough, say even deaf, hard of hearing, like we've had, I just recently had a student come from Tennessee, deaf, like speaks sign language. I still had to have the DHH specialist assess the student to be able to check the box in the IEP.
Okay, I hear you on that.
The audiologist can't check it.
But what I'm trying to understand is that, are we just trying to sift out if it's going to fall under SLD or OHI? Or is it, there are people in this room that don't agree with the findings of Dr. Beer and to say that she does not have that eligibility for CAPD? That's what my question is.
And I want to remind people, she already has the classification under SLD. So it's a finding that already falls within a legal classification she has with an IEP right now.
Yeah.
So are we all in agreement that Amelia, with Dr. Beer's findings for CAPD for Amelia?
We agree with that part. We can't capture it under the first page of the IEP without an assessment. That's all we're saying.
I'm not following what assessment, because her assessment from Dr. Beer
doesn't stand alone. We would have to have an ed specialist in a school psych to be able to check another box on page 1. Dr. Beer's assessment can't stand alone in terms of eligibility category. like Ms. Hong was saying, we will absolutely put it in the notes, put it in the present levels of performance, put it in the accommodations that she needs certain methodologies to learn best. Absolutely, we just can't change the first page of the IEP without those assessments.
So
We're not
in the
disagreeing
sake
with the CAPD at
In the
all.
sake of time, though, is there things today on today's agenda we can accomplish? So
So,
we can all walk out
yeah,
here feeling better?
hold on one second. Dr. Holly, so is that correct on what is being stated, just so I'm understanding, making sure I'm processing this correctly?
Here,
It's correct if you actually want the central auditory processing written into the IEP. It's not a classification on its own. It would fall under specific learning difference and then really then guide the services, accommodations, and goals for that. There are ways to do it, and other schools have done it differently, where they're taking this new information. Not quite sure why it wasn't picked up on the initial assessment, because this is separate than the hearing loss. We're probably talking about two separate things here that have been in place. Looking at what the school psychologist and the SLP assessment consists of, what they're looking for, how they're going to classify that in tandem with what we already know based on the professional audiology requirement. She already has an SLD. There's no reason why they cannot provide services with newfound medical evidence.
Sure.
But if you legally want to get it, we can look at accommodations, we can look at services, but if we want this woven in to the SLD classification umbrella under that, then they would. There's ways around it, but at this point they're saying they would.
Okay, so,
But you can go over some of the.
Yes.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
add these.
Agenda item number 5. So we're gonna go over the very specific recommendations. I copy and pasted it right from the report. So under communication management, bilateral hearing aids. I know that Kelly, you're gonna look into either another surgery or hearing aids for Amelia. So that's you. I know that.
I'm sorry. Circumstances have changed. So, does the district have any options for hearing aids? Getting support from the district?
I can ask. I know there's stuff for like eyeglasses, so let me ask. Unless Jaira, do you know of anything?
This is Jara Michiko speaking. Typically, the district does not purchase hearing aids for the students. However, as Ara mentioned, we could provide some agencies, information on local agencies that can be contacted to see if they would be able to assist. Now, the district does provide like assistance with like providing FM systems or amplification devices in the classroom setting that they do provide.
Okay. I will email your school nurses, Marianne, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll email Marianne and copy you, Jaira, because I know there's like new things coming, agencies coming up all the time. So let me do that.
Do you
Is there
know?
anywhere in the Bay Area a loaner hearing aid program?
Right, that's what I'm thinking of. But
Do something like that.
right, that's what I'm thinking of, Peggy. I just I'm not in the know, so I need to ask people that are in the know.
This is Jara speaking. I would believe that would be an excellent question for the audiologist. We have sometimes had the audiologist be able to provide loaners in the meantime while
Okay, I didn't know that.
they obtain their own hearing aids. I have heard of that in the past. I don't know which audiology office does
Right,
that,
yeah.
but I've heard of
I think
that.
there's one in Liverpool, actually. Okay, thank you. I'm just typing in, so. Okay.
Okay. Number 2, work with SLP.
What does that mean?
Work with the speech and language pathologist.
I know, but more specifics. That's really vague.
So she wanted.
She recommended, she said treatment approaches include the AT, the auditory training, and the top down, which is central resources training. So training her to make the most of what she has through things like the self-advocacy. She recommended visualizing and verbalizing. Now, the difficulty here is to have services on an IEP, I have to have a goal. And for me to write a goal, I have to have a baseline. When I assessed her, I did a comprehensive speech and language assessment, and because the concern was in expressive language, I also looked at her expressive language.
Right, we're completely pivoted in a different spot now, so.
Right. Well, I'm saying I didn't see any concerns regarding.
But that was in a different, yeah, I agree.
I
Because it was a
don't-
different
I don't-
umbrella. It was a whole different.
It is and it isn't. I mean, it has to do with her ability to process oral input, right? From her
Right, but there's
environment.
also a piece in the CAPD findings where she did really, really well too. So it was very.
Well, that was non-speech tasks, the temporal processing tests that involved the speech input, right?
I hear you. I guess.
So, what I'm saying is, I have no baseline for writing things like a self-advocacy goal because based on what I saw, she participated
Well,
in.
let me ask the question differently. So that was a year ago,
Right.
and as we've all kind of agreed,
Right.
She's in a completely different spot right now. So
Yes.
my understanding is you want to do different assessments to get that baseline.
I would need to do some type of assessment, and actually what Ms. Manchego and I would do in conjunction, because she does that self-advocacy piece as part of her assessment. So if we wanted to write that as a goal, I would have a baseline for that. Because just because it was recommended, Dr. Beer looks at the auditory processing, but she didn't do any classroom observations. She didn't do any teacher interviews. So I don't know how she's functioning in this academic environment.
Right,
That's what I
but
mean by the goal.
then I guess my question though, she only has 7 weeks left. 7, I counted 7 weeks for elementary. Is there going to be a different SLP at the middle school level?
Yes.
So I guess my question is, my understanding is you want to do some additional assessments. What are those for you personally that you want to do for Amelia that wasn't done a year ago?
Well,
That's what I'm trying to get understanding of. So the self-advocacy is her piece, but what are the tests that you would like to do?
Could you provide a clear checklist of what you're proposing either as newer or assessments that you did last year to now evaluate baseline this year?
Right.
So moms will.
so that was in the email I sent you, which you had asked. So looking at those complex oral directions, because we do in that comprehensive language assessment, I did the self last year, the self 5, and I did the expressive language component
Correct.
of the RESCA-E.
Right, which
covers a
which
lot.
she was fine.
Right.
I understand that.
Yes.
But my question to you now is,
And I'm answering that, is that I would look at complex direction following. So I would use a subtest of the self that looks at following directions in increasingly complex language. And I would also do following oral directions of the RESCA, which looks at her ability to follow increasingly longer, more complex directions and then act upon them. And then I
and
would also
so
look.
just hold on, those 2 tests were done last year and you want to redo
No,
them?
they
And they
were
weren't?
not.
Okay.
Receptive language was not a concern last year, and the core self that I administered does cover receptive language. She had no disability based on that. Okay, so I'm trying to express that what I saw, normally when a child has CAPD, I can pick up on clues.
Okay, I understand.
Right.
This isn't about what was done a year ago. So I guess what I'm saying is, what I was trying to pinpoint more specifically is we're pivoting completely different direction. And so the 2 tests that you've just reiterated just now are different.
They were not done, correct.
Correct, that's perfect. And the
Yes.
third one?
It's the test of narrative language. So this looks at narratives that are orally presented and then her ability to gain details, make inferences, and recall pertinent information, and that's directly related to
Right,
her.
yeah, no,
Right.
I agree with you. I think that's fine, but I want us to be really clear. It's not about what was done a year ago, because
Well,
I guess what I'm trying to say is I think it's more important to distinguish what the new additional tests that we need to prioritize now in the moment,
Yes.
because it's
and
shifted.
And I'm trying to
pivoted.
let you know why I need to do those tests as opposed to let's just look at the package, because
New baseline.
I saw no
But I don't.
impairment
But
last year. Right.
but
So I'm letting
I
you know
guess
the CAPD should not be new. It's something that would have been present last year. So I need to do more complex testing that looks a lot at her ability to
So,
process complex language.
I guess I see it completely differently.
Right.
We agreed to have the CAPD with the audiologist, who is the one qualified. So I think she's had it, and it's been it's jumbled in with her inattention, which was identified, because Dr. Beer also said that sometimes the CAPD issues get mimicked into other things,
Yes,
inattention, as well as the dyslexia piece. So I think it's been masked. And there's a very strong genetic component. And this is something that I'm 99% sure that I have and was never diagnosed ever and tested. And so I will be doing some additional research on that. And so if that comes out to be proven as the genetic component, I think that's going to be even more compelling. So I guess I disagree with the fact that it probably was masked, and maybe that's why it wasn't necessarily picked up. With your specific tests are different than the auditorial audiology tests that the audiologist found.
CAPD, but I have to treat the deficit, and because there wasn't a deficit before, if I am,
But I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that's the wrong thing to get hung up on.
That's fine. I think we should move on. Let's go to the next one here, because we're getting a little off topic, but I mean, I get what you're saying, and I get what everyone's
So using captions, it's not a part of her IEP, but we can add it.
And she has the audiobook. Does she have Learning Ally already?
Yes.
Okay. So this is captions. So if you show a YouTube video, you'd have to show them the captions.
Yeah, reading along with audiobooks to remember real-time sync lyrics.
Yeah, and well, you don't do Zoom, but if she was ever to go back to remote learning.
Yeah, that's a different point on here. It's number 4. For reading
Oh,
instruction. Yes.
yeah. So she's just talking about.
This is in class.
Using captions when appropriate. I will put it into our IEP.
Okay.
Okay. Continue with music. I know that we will continue that. General support for home and social situations, so reduce background noise. We can put that in the IEP, and I know
she does have headphones.
yes, noise canceling headphones.
Oh, yeah, right there. Okay. Yeah.
Communication strategies, this is what I wanted to put in. Right now she does have part of what's described here. She has to check in frequently, check for understanding, have Amelia repeat back the directions. She has all that. We can add in so that we get her attention before speaking to her, making sure that she is facing us and we are facing her, and keep those directions short and simple. I can add that to her IEP.
Okay.
Hearing protection.
Can we?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was going to go back to the chunking information and instructions.
Wait, what? Where's that?
That's under the.
Okay, we can add that.
It's under
Oh, it's under strategies. I was just gonna say that keeping instructions short and simple on the state testing, there's a
She has that.
simplified, she already has
She
that,
has that,
okay,
yes.
great. Just wanna make sure it's on there.
Yeah, she has that.
Okay.
The hearing protection, I think that's just within the community.
Is it?
It says use safe listening habits with volume limiting headphones in a noisy environment, like at a concert.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then smartphone accessibility. I know she has a smartphone, so she can access
they're
those
great.
things as well.
Those features are great.
Okay, the academic management, so suggested goals for individual work with the school SLP. I believe Sean kind of spoke to this already. She would like to do additional testing before she can create these goals to work with Amelia.
But there is a lot of work that's being done in that.
Yes, the auditory discrimination skills, she's doing a lot of that in Wilson with me when we meet. So, you know, the sounds and yeah, just the 10 parts. So the listening strategies,
Do we have that?
I could do a little bit with that. I mean, I'm not an SLP, right? But I could read her some
Well,
things and do the listening comprehension.
That's, well, the listening strategy
repetition,
is
clarification.
what she also can learn to do for herself, and that's part of the DHH assessment.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's good to know.
Strategies to aid in recalling the auditory information. I know we use a lot of, we're doing the mnemonic devices. A lot of the things for executive functioning. So a lot of it is
But
already
a lot of
built
it she
in.
forgets too, though, because I'll ask her.
Right. And,
It's
and
a-
with
but
that new
which-
information of her losing her hearing, like that.
No, I mean about the autonomic devices.
Yeah.
Like, the
We need to
multiplication
remind her.
one. Like I'd be
Yeah.
like, Amelia, what is that? She'd be like, I don't know. I remember we studied it, but I don't. So I'm more concerned about some of the retention. And I don't know how that would come into an accommodation.
That is the ADD, right? And then her memory. So
Her working memory issue
right.
is huge.
Her-
So, will she have a different psychologist at middle school as well?
Middle school.
I'm not sure who it is at
Miss
Harvest
Hong,
Park.
who's at middle school?
Which is it?
Harvest Park.
Harvest Park.
Yes, there's different.
Do you need to know the name? I work with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who's?
It's Eric Lee.
Oh, okay.
Would you like me to invite that psych to our main meeting?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay.
It's a transition meeting, but in terms of the eligibility, the OHI thing, it's going to be really important that we figure this out.
Okay.
Um,
Number 2, general support, frequent check-ins for understanding she has, use of repetition and rephrasing. We have the rephrasing part. I can add in the repetition. Use of visual aids, I know in the classroom they do a lot of it. It's not in her IEP, but I can add that to her IEP.
And one thing that might want to be added is use of also visual directions, not just on the board for tracking purposes, but that she has it possible in front of her to aid with the listening and the discrimination of sound.
Okay. We can add that in. Note-taking assistance as needed, I can add that as well because I know going into middle school,
That's different.
it's right. Note-taking assistance is different than access to written materials. We have that written in. I know in Miss Gregory's class currently, they don't do a lot of notes right now. So
Could be more important in middle school.
Right, right. So we'll add those things in. Extended test time, I noticed was not in her IEP. I can add that in.
It wasn't?
It wasn't.
Well, because
I don't
she
think
doesn't
I
have
do.
any
We don't
time
do
tests.
Right.
Yeah,
And then
well,
past is
She's gonna
untimed.
need it.
Right, yeah. We will add that in.
She's gonna need time and a half.
Time and a half.
That's consistent with Dr. Davis's report.
Okay. I'm on page 2, support specific to in-person instruction. So the FM system, we have set it up and it's working.
That was a question also, we'll
Yes.
need to inquire for the middle school on that as well.
Every classroom has a red
Does
cap.
middle school as well?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, they
I
have.
thought that.
Where did we capture that in the IEP though? Did we get into special factors or accommodations? So I'm not seeing it.
I need to add it in.
Okay.
Yeah. You need to let me know where to put that in.
Oh, maybe Ms.
Because-
Shira, where would it be best to capture the FM system?
Under special factors.
Under
and then,
special factors, okay.
Not under the first section, but under the district provided.
District provided. Got it.
Yeah, and then put in there that, Presentation Unified School District, provides the use of an amplification device such as a RedCast system in every class, in every classroom.
Okay. I may need to touch
And then
base
that
with you
protects
exactly
the-
where that is.
I'm
but
like, yeah,
I
I was
will-
looking at the same thing.
I will
I'm all-
put it in. Okay. Preferential seating, it's not in her IEP, but I know that it's being done, so I can put that in, so it's in writing. Access to a quiet workspace, class is generally pretty quiet and they move around the room as is, so I can put that in as well, so definitely middle school can apply that as needed. Listening inventories for Amelia and teachers to complete. I don't know where those would come from.
It is actually,
There's a website.
that also, I think, Jara,
Jara.
Which one did
Oh.
you just read?
Listing inventories?
Under 3.
Number 3, the last part of number 3? So that's your realm. That's not like something we would usually have.
Can you repeat, are you talking about what might impede is, what section are you in special factors?
No. We're going through Dr. Beer's recommendations, and one of the things was listening inventories for Amelia and teachers to complete. And Sean was mentioning
Are those
That-
surveys? Like,
would be part of your assessment.
it might be,
I don't. know what they are?
It's called the Life
There's a link
R,
right there.
and then there's a website. So
Oh.
between Sean and Jara, I think they will accomplish this
Yes.
during the assessment
It-
day.
What page is that on again on the report?
It's on
Um,
page 9,
9.
in the middle. 3E.
What is it, listing inventory?
You complete a,
Oh, okay, 3A, you said 3A?
3E,
E.
3E.
like Eddie.
Is it
Oh,
like
yes,
what
yes, I
things you
actually-
have a problem
I
listening to?
Oh, okay, Jara knows what this
Yes.
is.
What?
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
I'm familiar with the form, sorry. Basically, it interviews the teacher and the student as well. What their experience is like in the classroom. There's like a little check, there are scenarios that they read and then they have to check where the student falls within the classroom setting. And then we have one for the student themselves. So the student rates themselves and then the teacher also rates
And
where
then-
they feel the student.
And then what do you do with the information?
Environmental screening of how a student is operating in a classroom if they have diagnosed central auditory processing disorder or suspected.
Okay. And then what do
Just
you,
to kind of do that.
oh, so and then you like gauge whether you need more accommodations or, oh, okay, okay.
Every classroom is different, especially in middle school, right?
Yeah, because there are like gonna be 6 different classrooms.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
the screening
okay.
that the teacher
That makes
does,
sense.
that the student does, it's really helpful, it's not an assessment. It should be done, best practice maybe twice a year, because kids change, environments change. The teachers are aware this is a need, they need to do this. An
Okay.
environmental screening for the child.
Okay, it's like a check-in. I like it.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's an actual checklist.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
Yeah, and I do have the form, so yes, thank you so much, and for letting me know which form you were specifically talking about, so thank you.
You're welcome. Number 4, support specific to any remote instruction. Right now, we're not doing that, but if that were to happen, the speaker will use external microphones.
Oh,
Yes, the
okay,
speaker.
the person talking,
Yes.
not,
Yes. Amelia should have headphones, and she does. Should use headphones and
closed captioning, so we'd have to turn that on her Zoom account, basically. Or not hers, the person in it would have to turn.
Kelly, do you want me to put these 3 things in her IEP if remote instruction does ever have to happen again?
that doesn't go on the, external, or the exceptional circumstances page. Was the-
Ah,
Oh,
yes.
yes,
I
that's
heard it in
exactly
there.
where it goes.
Page.
Okay.
That's exactly where,
It goes under that news section.
Yes.
yes.
Special circumstances.
Yes.
Okay.
That's like
Know the
COVID
form much
section.
better
The
than me.
COVID section.
Yes, it is the COVID form, exactly, got it. Okay, and then number 5, technology considerations for any current or future note-taking needs. So again, in middle school, if she does need access to that, they have the Smart Pen, Otter, well, these are recommendations. You bought the Smart Pen, right?
No, she bought a C-pen,
A
I
C Pen,
thought.
okay, that's
I
different.
thought a
Oh,
smart
this
pen.
is helping with the note-taking.
So this is really more going with Dr. Davis's findings for note taking. This is going to be really important for middle school. So wherever we can put that in, I know in Dr. Davis's report, he was talking about more about printouts or different ways to get the notes
Right.
to her.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
she will
we
have
got
to
a copy
print
of
them to
lecture notes.
Yes.
Yeah, or something like that, like it can convert to
Copy of teacher
PDF.
notes, front loading of PowerPoints or presentations,
Right.
printed out copies. Those are all ways that they can front load her with those, and then she can refer to them
Oh, here we
for
are.
new challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we can enhance this, what is it, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4,
what I-
5?
There's quite a few accommodations, and my ask is that could I chunk them and
Well, that's
put
what
them in more readable categories?
Well, that's what I was thinking, this one is already captured that she receives the teacher's notes in advance. Can't you just put parentheses what Dr. Holly just said?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few that kind of overlap, and I wanted
there's
to
another one that
make it more
They can all
streamlined.
they can all be chunked together, and you can use languages such as examples of.
Mm-hmm.
This will all be really, really critical for middle school, so I appreciate you synthesizing it.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I will work with Gwendy at the middle school too, and we're gonna look it over. It's gonna be phenomenal before she goes.
This is Jara speaking. I highly recommend what you just said, chunking it, separating it out, in easier language for the teachers to
Yeah.
read through.
That's true.
I like explicit instruction, right? so explicit with our teachers as well, because especially with the condition that we're dealing with, I think it's beneficial.
And remember, you're gonna have 6 or 7 teachers reading it, so
Yeah.
the more
Yeah, it
specific,
definitely has to
more
be.
clear, very concrete, the better.
Yes, agreed.
5 minutes.
Okay, so number 6, exception from spoken foreign language requirements if needed. So like when she gets to high school, maybe, sign language would be better than a foreign language. And then number 7, strongly recommend that Amelia be evaluated by DHH, and we are doing that. You have the assessment plan, and Sean will also be doing assessments under speech and language. We already talked about number 6, which is the OHI eligibility. So at this time, we're not just going to add it in. We recognize that she does have the CAPD, and we are, making sure her IEP is comprehensive and really does support her moving forward. And then once we have more information, we'll meet again in May, maybe even before then, depending if we get even more information. But I think that summarized everything for our thoughts.
Oh no, I was making an aha moment that you're right, there are some that are very similar, so
Yes.
I understand what you're saying though.
There's a lot of overlap. As
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
We're looking at the same kid with the same needs in multiple areas.
Right.
So my question before we conclude is how much time will the deaf and hard of hearing testing take? I just need an understanding of time allotment. I know you said that your testing could be accommodated in very easily and with the current schedules, but for the deaf and hard of hearing testing, how much time? I think you mentioned in the last meeting, but I don't remember what time allotment you said.
This is Jara. So typically, depending on the student, and it could be possibly up to 4 hours in total. There's 2 tests I'll be doing the testing of auditory comprehension and listening skills, and then the test of expressive language. And then I'll be doing a classroom observation, and then doing the self-advocacy intake with Amelia. So it could take possibly about 4 hours, but I will definitely try to meet with her during the time that she's not in a core class. That's how I usually do it. So I can work with the classroom teacher, to determine what would be the best time for me to pull her out, if you agree to testing, and try not to impact her academically. So but roughly about 4 hours.
And the self-advocacy intake is what again?
And then just the advocacy is just basically asking questions, scenarios. What would you do if you didn't hear the teacher and you needed assistance or clarification? And then there's like a rating scale from like 1 to 5, and basically saying that it's an informal inventory. So it just says like, oh, do I do this most of the time, some of the time, that kind of a thing. And then based on how they score, we know if they have sufficient advocacy skills to support them in the classroom independently, or is that an area of need? And then if it is an area of need, then if we provide the services, then that's something that becomes a goal, and then we work on moving them path through. Like there's mastery right at the very end. So if they don't score proficient, then our goal is to get them all the way to the end, which is mastery.
That's nice for her going into secondary to really focus on that area.
And how much time will your testing take?
In terms of pull-out testing,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just asking.
probably around an hour.
Okay. And then are we going to have a follow-up IEP meeting to discuss those results?
We're trying to align it to her annual IEP, which is scheduled for May, but I'm hearing that if the team can get it done sooner, then we will definitely meet as soon as they finish. So
I don't think there's any way we can cover it all in one meeting. So I would strongly recommend that whatever, we get the testing done and then go through those findings, because, if it's going to impact some of the conversations that we've even had today, to make sure we're all in sync, that would be my recommendation. Just have a separate meeting. I mean, I hate to call out another meeting, but I'm concerned that there's no way we can get through everything that in
Right.
It'd be a
transition.
long
Yes. I just think it's based upon some of the conversations that we've had. I don't know if we could even get to. I want to make sure that we get whatever we do on an agenda that we can get through.
the week,
I
the
would
24th.
propose having it two parts so we can really keep them separate, focus on.
Why don't we want to break a
what came out of the
record?
Assessment, where does that guide us, what's coming next, that we need to discuss.
Okay.
We've done
Were you
longer
trying to
board
move it
meetings
away
than this.
from last week of
We can do
school?
it.
Is that the idea?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Sarah speaking again. I just wanted to let you know, I sent you, an email, like, has the, information for a local agency or, that, provides support for children that are in need of hearing aids. So I just,
okay.
if you can share
Forward
that
to
with
you.
the family, that would be great.
I'm gonna see it too.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have some action items. I know that Aura did email Mary Ann regarding some agencies, maybe a loaner hearing aid in the meantime. Ms. Mokashi, please review the assessment plan, and once you agree, sign off. Then Sean, Dean, and Jara and Chego can start their testing, and as soon as they finish up and are ready to, I will call that meeting so that we can discuss the results and how it affects the IEP and how we can better support Amelia with those findings. And then we'll meet for her annual with the middle school team to finalize everything.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.